Caitlin, welcome to Get Shit Done.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
I'm excited she's here. I don't think we've ever had a founder from St. Louis on our podcast or building in St. Louis, from and building in St. Louis. So I'm super excited. I know our OG listeners know that I lived in Chicago for 10 years, and I was just asking Caitlin about like how the weather is, and she's like, it's March, it's 70 degrees, but it's probably going to be like 30 tomorrow.
Yep. Yeah. Kind of like our current tariffs, right? It's
Yes.
one thing one day and the next it's something totally different.
Oh my God, we're definitely gonna get into that today, especially since you're in logistics, and what that impact is. I know there's so many businesses where just like having to make all of these really impactful decisions right now. So we'll get there, but I want to know a little bit more about you and the human behind all of this. So I love to do check-ins with our guests just to kind of set the tone of where you're at and honoring that. So, on a scale from 1 to 10, how would you say you feel right now, knowing it could change literally in like 5 minutes? But 1 to 10, what would you say you're feeling right now in the business? How do you feel?
I'm at a 7. I'm really excited about our current growth and our team, but I'm also so overworked, right? And it's the reality of being a founder is you're trying to tackle all these things. So I'd love a little more work-life balance for me, but I'm also very, very appreciative of all the growth right now.
I love that. What are some things that you do to pour back into yourself? Because it's very hard when you're growing a scaling company.
Yes. Yeah. Great question. I've found a lot of things recently that have been instrumental in protecting my peace each day. So I absolutely love journaling in the morning. It helps me to really set the tone for my day and give me a bit of that peace. I love meditation. Therapy is amazing, and it only took me until age 37 to find therapy, but really, I mean, we carry so much weight with us every day. So it's really nice to be able to talk to somebody that isn't your friend or family member or your colleague to be able to let that down. So those are the main things that I really focus on to kind of bring me back to a peaceful state when I start to feel frazzled.
I love that, how you protect your peace. And honestly, like, as long as you get there, like your form of therapy, whatever it is, like I think that's the most important thing. It's interesting because my mom, when my parents got divorced, this was like when I was like 8, but she immediately put me in therapy. And this was, I mean, way before therapy was like
Yeah.
mainstream. And a lot of communities like therapy and kind of still is seen as like the devil sauce or like you're just supposed to
Oh,
pray it
yeah, it's a
away,
negative
right?
thing. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and so I remember, God bless this therapist. I don't remember her name, but I saw it as McDonald's Mondays, where literally my mom would take me to McDonald's because she felt guilty about putting me in therapy. And this nice lady would just ask me questions while I colored. And then I stopped going after a month. And when I got old enough, my mom was like, yeah, after a month, she turned to me. She was like, I don't think Alex needs therapy. I think you need therapy. So I'm glad you're
Yeah.
in therapy, girl. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter
Yeah.
how long it takes.
Totally. Totally. I wish more people, and I'm glad we're there as a society and sort of debunking that myth that therapy is not great. When you find the right fit, it's magical.
Yes, amen. We love it. So we love protecting your peace. So let's get back to the little Caitlin. Little Caitlin. I love like hearing what people thought they were gonna do and where they ended up, and what the through line is. So when you were growing up, what did you think you wanted to be doing in your career?
I never had this, aha, I'm gonna be a doctor or a lawyer. I always knew I wanted to be a caretaker, right? In every sense of that word. I knew that I wanted to take care of my family. I wanted to be the breadwinner. I wanted to be somebody that other people could look to, both for financial help, but also for stability. And so that really drove me as a kid to do better and better at school, try to, find that next goal, that next achievement. And then when I hit college, I was fascinated. So I had never been on an airplane, and I was fascinated with this idea of the global trade environment. And so international business was my chosen major when I was a freshman at the University of Missouri, or Mizzou. And I remember they said on like day two of our freshman year, hey, you have to declare a language for international business. And this was 2005. And China had started to become this like global superpower of manufacturing. And I said, okay, I'm going to take Mandarin. And so I jumped right into it. So I really didn't have an idea, and of course, did not have an idea that I would be in logistics ever. I just knew I was going to go travel the world and do business. And that was about it. So to all those listening in that are maybe in college and not sure what they want to do, or out of college and they're like, I don't know my path. It is absolutely okay. I'm here to tell you it is absolutely okay to kind of fall into where your career is calling you.
I love this. I also love that you call this out because looking back, how absurd is it when you get out of your house, you go to college, and people are like, you need to figure out what you want to do with your life. And you're just
Right?
like, I'm just learning how to do life on my own. Like, I just got out of the house. I'm still kind of dependent, and depending on what your circumstances are, these were mine, still kind of dependent on my family. And then
Yeah.
after college is when you actually go on your own in some way. And so it's just like, but you're asking me to know what I want to do with the rest of my life? That's
Right.
insanity.
Right.
I do like this through line though, that you got into Mandarin, and kudos to you. In high school, I studied Japanese for a semester. And it is so hard because the
Yeah.
tonality piece of it is not in. Like, you can say, at least I can say, I don't know enough about Mandarin, but you can say like, hey or hey, and it
Huh?
still means the exact same thing in English. But in like Japanese, I remember it was like my professor, I said something, I don't remember, but he was just like, that meant this. And when you changed your tone, it meant something else.
Yes.
When you went through that process, what did you find was so different from how you learned English to how you learned Mandarin?
Sure. I have so much respect for anyone that does not have English as their native language that learns English, because it is so, I have actually thought, man, English is the difficult language, right?
Yes, it
And
is.
so it brought me a lot of respect for English speakers that have it as a secondary language. But as I was learning Mandarin, one, like I had to commit, right? Like there were nights in college that all my friends went out and I couldn't, because I was like, I have a test in the morning and I had to die. It was almost like a full-time job learning Mandarin. Um, but I also realized too that it has this beautiful it has this beautiful history, and there's a beauty behind it, right? Even some of the characters, and same with Japanese and a lot of other Asian languages, the characters are symbolic of the word in some cases. Like it looks like the word that you're writing. So I just fell in love with it. And then actually at the time, Mizzou did not have enough credits for me to graduate in Mandarin. So I had to move to Beijing, and I went to Peking University in Beijing, and I fell in love with the language even more, with the culture, um, the history of China. I was just enthralled, and I knew I'm coming back here. So really quickly after college, I went back to Mizzou, finished my degree, graduated, sold everything I owned. Everything I owned, which wasn't much, but I took a huge risk, and kind of said goodbye to my family, and then I moved across the world, and I moved to Beijing to start a job at a company I had really not much information on. A professor at Mizzou helped me to get my foot in the door there. It was a small marketing company, and on my first day, I realized not one person spoke English. And so, imagine trying to like negotiate certain, salary negotiations in Mandarin. And, those are things you don't really necessarily learn at first when you're learning a language. So it was very challenging, but I fell in love with sort of being on my own in a big city. And I always say it was the best failure of my life because it led to success. So I thought I was going to be this uber successful businesswoman in China. and I fell flat on my face. There were months where, the labor laws are so different when you go country to country, and so there were months where I didn't even get paid. And I had sold everything I owned, and when I landed, I had two roommates, and I'll never forget. I woke up that next morning after I landed, so jet lagged, and they said, "Hey, Caitlin, the landlord's here for your rent." I said, "Okay, great." I think it was like, $800 a month or something. So I hand him the $800 and he's like, "Oh no, in China you have to prepay your rent, 6 months in advance." And literally it wiped me out of all of my savings that I had brought over there. I didn't get paid for months. And I mean, I am not kidding you, Alex. There were days that all I ate were roasted sweet potatoes from a street vendor and, essentially went to a vegetable stand and made like a Greek salad or whatever I could. And it really humbled me. It humbled me to think, if I want to succeed, I am going to have to work really hard. Things are not just going to be given to me because I can speak Mandarin or because I have a business degree. I am going to have to differentiate myself. So, that's how I fell into logistics because one of my roommates actually in China was, I believe he was an oil trader and he was getting his master's. And he said, "Hey, have you ever thought about logistics?" And I immediately turned to him. I'm like, what is that? They don't teach that in college. And then I just fell into it and I started researching it. And I was fascinated that this was the piece that really held global trade together.
I love this is why I love asking people and seeing where the story goes
Yeah.
because there's always a through line. How incredible, like I completely hear you on the like being super broke, not knowing what you're gonna do next, and you feeling like you're a failure. Like because
Yeah.
we put so much pressure societally, especially on kids, in college or coming out, of like you need to have it all figured out. Like instead
Right.
of being like, no, you need to go through these things to like kind of build tough skin. But I think the coolest thing is that I believe there are no coincidences, there's no mistakes. It's more of like, oh, you ended up there, you learned Mandarin, which is, I mean, China is a manufacturing logistics freaking huge like empire. It is so important today. And
Yeah.
it's funny now I have friends who are like, raising children and they're like, I want my kid to learn Mandarin. That wasn't a thing 10, 15
No.
years ago. You were way ahead. So I love this. So we started talking about we are, met a friend. We went through college. Were you still in college at this time when you met the trader?
No, no, this was after college. This was the first career. So I studied abroad and then went back, got my
Okay.
degree, and then went back to China. I said, this place is calling me home. It always kind of felt like a second home.
Okay. So we're back in China. So tell us about how we got into logistics. Like, what was that first job like?
Rough. It was rough. So I will tell you. So I in China, and then I decide, okay, I want to do global logistics, but first I need to understand logistics from the very beginning, right? And so I decided to move back to St. Louis, where I'm born and raised. I just felt like I needed a softer landing pad, right, to start completely over again and pick a career I didn't necessarily even train for in college. So I came back to St. Louis. And I started my career in trucking, which is not for the faint of heart. There were many days I mean, all around me were men. There were no women on my team. There were no women managers. And I remember just crying in a bathroom one day because all you ever hear is like curse word after curse word, people yelling at truckers, at warehouse men. It was such a negative environment. And I was like, I'm not cut out for this. I don't think I could do this. But I told myself, you have to learn this. This is the bare bones of logistics, right? What we call the first mile and the last mile. A truck picks up cargo that goes to an airport or goes to an ocean port. You have to learn this piece. So I started out there and then got my grounding, kind of understanding terminology, understanding the business. Um, and, through my network, really started to meet people that were in the global side of logistics.
Okay, awesome. So then we have this awesome journey. We go to China, we come back to the States, we go back to China. We have this first job. It was rough. So take us through how we got to your current business and how did you identify through all of these experiences you were having that there was a need in the market for what you're doing?
Sure. So when I started in global logistics, I really, that's when my passion was really born for logistics. And I have always loved communicating with other cultures, really problem solving in and of itself. And so global logistics is like a myriad of solving problems every day. It's communicating, utilizing my Mandarin, but also communicating with all these other countries around the world and really trying to keep a supply chain efficient and effective. And so my passion like was really born in my first job in global logistics. And I learned so much. It was like drinking from a fire hose, and I was learning so much so quick. And the wild thing is, there was no manual, there was no course that I could take for this, there was no degree, no certification. Global logistics still today is really considered a trade. And so I kind of called myself like the Goldilocks of freight because I worked for the very large freight forwarders, or very large, freight forwarders who do global logistics. And then I went to some medium-sized forwarders and then some very small forwarders. And I really saw that in each one of these companies I was with, the approach to global logistics was the same. It was very reactive, very focused on, well, it's out of our hands. We don't own the ship. We don't own the terminals. And it aggravated me so much because I thought there has to be a better solution. There has to be more transparency for sure, but there has to be more strategy. And how can you approach more strategy? And so then I saw that, this leads me up to 2017. I was sort of at this like cornerstone of, can I build something that really marries together a boutique customer service, right? A tailored micromanagement of every shipment with a cutting edge technology that provides that transparency to a consumer on their global supply chain. And so, I really saw that there were a lot of forwarders kind of operating the exact same. And then also pairing it with the fact that there were no women in leadership. There's lots of women in logistics, actually, but they're in entry level positions, they're in admin positions, or they're in operations positions for decades. And I never had a female mentor. I never had someone in a decision making position that was vouching for me. Instead, I had a lot of men that told me, "Hey, pipe down. Don't bring up this on this call. Hey, this isn't done right. I want to do it this way." And when in all reality, I had that communication and that connection with the customer and I knew what they wanted. And so, I said to myself, I know logistics, I know what's needed, and I know that more women need to be in leadership roles. How can I roll all of this into a business? And then another big piece of my heart was philanthropy. And so I knew that I knew all of this and I could do this in logistics, but how do I create good in the world with it? What is my purpose? And so before I even had a company name, I knew that my purpose was going to be to essentially take a portion of the proceeds every month and give back to communities. And so that's how Gateway for Good was born, which was really, my purpose, right? It's why we get out of bed every day. And my team, I tell them every day now, hey, I know we're going through a lot. Tariffs are crazy. Space is and rates are changing every day. But remember at the end of the day, you're the good that you're doing, that you're serving this client for, it's gonna go back into the community. And so each one of our staff members gets to choose a month now, every single month of the year, and more than one too, where they get to choose a cause that's near and dear to their hearts or to their client's heart.
Mhm.
And we don't just give financial, we show up we mentor teens. We show up to serve veterans and animals. And, we actually had a team member that went to Vietnam. She's from Vietnam, and she served over 200 families that walked miles that day for cooking oil and food and money and essentially gift boxes that all came from a year's worth of work in shipments that delivered this beautiful gift to people in need. So,
Yes.
anyways, long-winded way to kind of answer your question.
I love this. So we identified the need in the market. You've
Yeah,
had this experience and exposure. And it kind of reminds me of Kara Smith Brown, who we've had on this podcast. She's part of her career was at Coyote Logistics
sure.
in Chicago. And it was so interesting 'cause she was like, there was actually a good amount of women on their in their team, but she was in leadership and she helped them. They were like, we're thinking of IPOing, and she was like, I had to figure out how we're gonna craft it and do all these things. So to your point of like having more women in leadership, I loved hearing that. And so I want to actually take it back. I love that you already had this clarity of like, here's what we can solve, but also we're gonna have impact too. So when you think about that moment, you're like, okay, this is the need. I would love for you to walk us through how you actually got started, because one of my favorite sayings around business is like the least sexy, the actual vertical and industry, the most opportunity that is there. I think people love
Yeah.
talking about tech and apps, but people make the most money in the least sexy industries because a lot of people don't, like you said, there it's a trade, it's a whatever it is. And so I would love for you to walk us through like this is a capital intensive space
Yeah.
too.
Right.
What were those steps you did to actually get started once you knew, okay, this is an opportunity?
So this is the fun part because I tell you, this will show you my tolerance of risk is very high. Because, I will say I had a very scrappy business plan put together, right? So 2017, I say, okay, I decided I wanted to start the business. Next step was, okay, I've got to build out all the tenants that I need to start this thing. So I start doing this research. And I'm like, you know what? Maybe I'll go this route, or maybe I'll go this route. I'm just going to start today. So I start the process of certification. Now, to be a freight forwarding business, you do have to have a lot of certifications. To be a freight forwarder, ironically, you don't have to have, a degree or, a certification, but to obviously be an operating freight forwarding company, you do. We're governed by the Federal Maritime Commission for the ocean freight side of things, and then something called AATA for the air freight. But aside from those certifications, I knew that I had to have banking relationships. I had to have vendors all over the world. So I really just started putting pedal to the metal and going. Every day was just, okay, what do I need to get done today? And so I kind of started first with that certification. And then I started looking at tech, right? Like, what tech do I need to offer these customers that's going to be different than what I did before? So as I'm trying to put together all these certifications and the banking relationships, I'm demoing all of these different tech tools. And it was probably a good thing I didn't think about capital in the beginning because I think it would have scared me away from actually just going forward. So I'll never forget, I get my certification in, let's see, September of that year. September through November, all the certifications started to come in. Meanwhile, I had some customers that over the course of my career knew I told them, I'm going to be starting my own business soon, and I'll reach out when I'm ready. Well, they came to me unexpectedly, and so you never turn down business, right? And so I had no technology, no banking relationship set up at that point, but I had my first customer, and so I'm rushing to get all of this together, and I ended up putting our very first shipment. I'll never forget. It involved truckloads from Mexico. I ended up maxing out every personal credit card I had to put, like, I think it ended up being like $23,000 that I had to pay this trucking company because, Alex, the thing I totally didn't think about was no one was going to give me credit. I was a
Yeah,
brand new
not in the
baby
beginning.
business. No
Yeah.
one's going to say, hey, here's net 30 payment terms. You go, girl. They were like, yeah, we'll ship this product for you, but you have to prepay
Yeah,
us.
they're like, pay me. We don't
And
trust you
so,
yet.
like, my stomach dropped. I'm like, oh my gosh. And so I'm gathering together like a myriad of different credit cards. God bless these first vendors that were partners of mine, because I'm sure they were probably scared, like, okay, I don't know how this is going to turn out. But you just go forward, you drive it, and it's ugly and it's not pretty. And you're trying to figure this out shipment by shipment. And then I started to kind of get a little bit wiser about, okay, this is a super capital intensive world, and I'm going to have to be very, very smart about how I do this. So in the beginning, our first shipments, and still to this day, we procure most of our clients' shipments from China. And so I immediately joined this organization that's basically like a freight forwarding association that's global, and it's called WCA, and it's been such a beautiful, I've been a part of their network for many, many years now. Well, I also had a really close vendor I had worked with previously from China, and I reached out to him and I said, listen, I just started my business. I've got the customers, I've got, the stability and the certifications, but I need credit. And it only took this one agent taking a risk on me. And he said, I'll give you net 90 payment terms. And it changed the game.
That's amazing. 90?
It was incredible. And
Wow.
I'll forever always be grateful for that person. And so what we were able to do then is ship our clients freight. So that net 90 starts the second the steamship line departs from that port. But by the time I would finally deliver to my client's facility in the US, we're like 30 days into that net 90. So then I can bill out and I can receive those funds in the next net 30. So then I'm at net 60 with this agent. So I was always able to remain under those payment terms. And then month after month, year after year, I just built up so much of a relationship with them. Um, so in the beginning, it was really ugly. It was really
Yeah.
scary. There were nights I didn't sleep. Meanwhile, I'm getting sued from former employers for non-competes and, taking it on the chin. And I just said, I'm here for a purpose and for a reason. And if I don't fight like hell in the
Yeah.
beginning, this ship is going to go under. And so I really pulled out every tool I could possibly pull out. My friends and family and my faith were an anchor. And I always say this to entrepreneurs is, listen, I can give you all the business advice you want. The reality is you have to anchor yourself to something. Some people anchor themselves to, a futuristic financial goal, like maybe they want a private yacht one day. Other people anchor themselves to family or to friends. But for me, it was like my anchor was faith. I knew that I was here for a purpose, and I knew that that was unwavering. So luckily, it pulled me through those first really, really messy, messy
Mm.
years. And then I will shout out the SBA. The SBA and my banking partner, Bank of America, were incredible at helping me once we hit that fast growth. In year one, we did over 1 million in sales, just me and my kitchen table. And so
Yeah.
I knew I needed a better banking relationship. I needed a bridge loan to get me through, to grow to the next goal. And so with that, I was able to piece things together and find, some really advantageous capital through that. So there's a lot of tools out there too in the beginning.
I love that. And there's a couple things I want to dive into. The first thing, I love that you mentioned, especially in certain categories and verticals, federal is really great. Like SBA can be really great
Yeah.
because if it is something that the US or whatever country you're in, they're trying to solve, they want to put money behind those things. I want to go back to, you said, when I put everything on my credit card for that $23,000 freight, I already had a customer. That is key and that is amazing. How in the heck did you get that first customer?
Network. I love I think it's a saying called network is your net worth. That resounds so loudly in my career history because I wouldn't be here today without my network. It was my network that vouched for me. I had to have recommendations to get a freight forwarding license from the FMC. I needed to pull on my network from the very beginning. But I also I approached customers in my past before the company. I approached them as partners, not looking at profit, 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 but looking at purpose. How can I solve this problem for you? I made sure that they knew Caitlin Murphy is the most reliable freight forwarding expert that I can reach out to. So always being available, always being able to come with a solution, right? In this day and age, everyone is coming to everyone with problems. But sometimes I look at it as, there's in that world, they're coming to you with a problem because they want to get your advice for a solution. Not to say you have to solve it, but it should be an open dialogue. It's their supply chain, right? And so I built this really beautiful partnership of, reliance and trust. And that really helped these customers to take a total risk on me, and to follow me, which was a really beautiful thing.
I love this because there are like repetitive themes we call out on the podcast for the founders we end up interviewing. And one of the top things around sales, right, is that the most effective way to do sales is through relationships. And if even everything in the story so far that you're talking about, it's like relationship after someone at SBA that was like, hey, let me help. I mean, shout out to Anoop over in New York's economic development office that helped us get certified. Like he like helped us to fast track when we needed to
Yes.
get something done. I'm like, it's those individuals. And I think
Yes.
sometimes we look at, the actual entity itself. It's not the entity, it's the individual. So I would love for you to actually walk us through because in tech people talk about network effects, but I think with logistics connects the world. That is the ultimate network
Mhm.
effect. And when you think about having to do this, you have to have so many partnerships and collaborations
Yes.
to be effective. Can you walk us through how do you build those relationships and partnerships to be able to do the work that you do? Because I think that's one of the most important things in order to be effective in sales and in business in general, you have to have great partnerships.
Yeah, you said that so beautifully, Alex. And that is at its core, that is freight forwarding global logistics. It's relationship management. Because we don't own the ships or the trucks or the warehouses. We are a non-asset based entity that's arranging freight from point A to point B, and you're dealing with lots of these different partners along the way. And I've seen so many bad examples of companies that disrespect these vendors. And I knew, okay, I have to treat them as if they're my own employee. And if I treat my employees up here at a gold standard, they deserve the same thing. So I mean, of course, payment terms, right? Like that speaks very loudly for respect. But there are other things that in how we built these relationships is, everybody is looking for what I call like a dual-ended partnership, right? So I'm not just coming to them and saying, "Hey, can you help us, book our freight from China to the US?" They're looking at us too and going, "Can you help us book our freight from US to China?" Right? So it's this beautiful relationship as it relates to global partners, but then also they're the subject matter expertise, whether it's Egypt or Pakistan or China or Vietnam. I'm not an expert at those customs compliance processes, but they are. And they know that if Global Gateway gives a shipment to them, we are trusting you with our client's freight and we are expecting the highest level of service. And so we went through and we actually last year obtained our ISO 9001 certification, which is very, very unique in my world. But the reason I did this is because supplier management is so important to me because it's important to our customers and to our delivery of our quality of service. And I saw this need to really tailor our internal processes to make sure quality was at the top. So now we have an entire supplier qualification system that we follow. Um, and in the beginning, um, I looked at partners very differently. So, going back to 2020 when the supply chain started going crazy
Oof.
and you could not get anything done. I remember there were some of my clients' freight was container loads from Asia, and they were stuck at LA's port for days, right? There's no information, no visibility from the port. You feel so helpless. Things are backed up on the railroad going into places like Chicago. And you feel like you can't do anything, but that's totally wrong. When you start to remember that it's relationships, these people are overworked at the ports. These people are working probably double shifts now to try to get through all of these containers. Treat them like a human being. And so I remember picking up the phone and calling every, Bob, Dave, and Sally at the terminal and saying, please, can you prioritize these three containers for this hotel opening? They can't open their hotel without these containers. I will buy your entire team pizza tomorrow. I'll do a whole pizza party lunch if you can just prioritize these containers. And of course, they can't promise, right? But sure enough, there were so many times, Alex, that those containers got moving that very next day. And I would like to believe it's because I treated them as a human being. I treated them and respected them. I've done handwritten notes and sent flowers, delivered door dashes, really tried to respect the people that are touching the freight that we handle. And I think it really goes a long way because it teaches someone that, wow, okay, if we see Global Gateway Logistics on a shipping manifest or a bill of lading, we know the type of people that they are and we respect
Yeah.
them. We never pick up the phone and call and scream and yell. And a fun fact, we did not plan it this way, but right now my entire team is female. And what's beautiful about it is like we've taken such a beautiful approach, almost like a mothering approach to freight management, where we know that things are going to go wrong, just like when you're raising children, things are going to go wrong and there's going to be messes to clean up. But when you do it with grace and humility and respect, you can get a lot farther a lot faster.
I love everything you just said. I was just listening to the Gray Area, this podcast. It's kind of like philosophy, but they had this episode about the cost of doing things alone. And
Mhm.
I'm still listening to it, but it really resonated because I recently had a women's circle and we were talking about how can we remain present and connected in busy season. And these are all badass business women. And one of the things I shared with the group was like, I realize I'm the most stressed is when I'm in isolation. So anytime in business, I am the most stressed when I am trying to figure things out by myself. And then I realize I'm like, I have this whole network of people. And I completely empathize with women when we do this, because so often we say this so often in our community, our founders, when they're overwhelmed and stressed, I'm like, who are you talking to? And they're telling me about all the things they're doing behind the scenes, but I'm like, but who is supporting you? And I get
Yeah.
it because we as women are socialized differently. We're supposed to be the superwomans and to do it perfect. And it's just BS where I'm like, I'm like, what would my white male counterpart do? I look at all my advice,
Right?
some of my advisors, I'm like, what would Mike do? And Mike would pick up the phone
Yeah.
to your point and say, hey, here's where I'm at. I would love your feedback on that. And that's one of the things I do now with people. I have like standing meetings with people
Yeah.
that are just in alignment in my ecosystem. I had one with my friend who's a VC the other day. We're not doing the same things, but we give each other
Yeah.
perspective. So when we need something, we'll be like, oh, Alex, this is what I'm working on, or Mike, this is what I'm working on. And so I love you mention that because I think we think about growth and scale and we forget that you can't
Sure.
necessarily scale human relationships, but it is the most impactful thing that you will ever be able to do to scale a business. So I love that breakdown because it's like, that's what makes these companies so
Yeah.
great.
And
So
diversity too. I mean, having
absolutely.
diversity of thought is so
Mhm.
incredible. There's a great episode of a Hidden Brain podcast a
Love Hidden
watering
Brain.
about a watering hole in Africa and how so many species of animals come to the same watering hole, but it's where the most life is born, the most, cross-pollination is happening at that. And so I take my business as the same view as, I hire people that have no backgrounds in freight and people that have 15 years in freight. And then same thing with our vendors, we bring on people that have a very specific set of expertise and maybe dangerous goods shipping and people that only ship, luxury goods, consumer goods. So the beauty is like when people think differently about approaching a problem, oh my goodness, the solutions are far beyond what I could come up with on my own.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love that. So when you think about, and I love bringing this up to folks because a lot of this is doing a lot of unscalable things to figure out what can scale. So what would you say are some of the most unscalable things or like the top unscalable thing you did early on and maybe even still do today that were integral to how you were able to grow and scale this business?
Great question. I think the toughest lesson, and the one that really will strap you down and really hurt you from trying to scale, is this idea that every customer is a good customer, and it's not. And it's we've
Amen.
learned the very, very hard way. We had a customer in the beginning. I mean, in the beginning, you're taking anything you can get, right? When you start a business. But then after a while, you start to build up. Okay. Like we actually, they're stepping outside of payment terms almost every single month. This is not sustainable. And then you have these conversations with them and they still don't respect it. And then you get to a point where you realize, I mean, there was a point, a very raw point, 2 years into the business, where about a year and a half into the business, where I realized, wow, our AR aging was at like over 1 million, and it was like over 90 days. Some invoices were like 120 days late. And I just remember feeling sick to my stomach thinking, if they don't pay me, I'm going to run out of capital here soon. Um, and I think the amount ended up getting up to over $1 million. And, that's not an easy chunk of change when we have to prepay. So in my business, about 80% of every dollar has to be prepaid to carriers. So you're really only working on about 20% of that capital
Wow.
in-house. And so everything is going in and going out. And I remember sitting at a cafe when that customer said, like, basically called me and said, well, I mean, I don't know what we're going to do. We might have to file bankruptcy. And I about lost it in that cafe, just crying and thinking, man, all of this hard work and risk I've put in is going to go away because I just put, 70% of my portfolio into one customer. And so I say that with a grain of salt because when you're getting started, yes, you do. You're so hungry for the business, you lose sight of, is this our customer target? Like, are we really doing the kind of business we want to be doing? And you really also have to be so careful with payment terms. And it taught me that not all business is good business. You really have to be careful and choosy about who you're bringing on in the beginning because some can sink you. And you've heard thousands of startup stories of failure, and a lot of them pertain to the fact of, we took on too much too fast. It was a customer that was too big, or a customer that was too demanding. And so we effectively were able to kind of walk that back. We ended up getting paid every single penny over the course of the next three
Yes.
months, and then we unfortunately had to walk away from that client.
Good for you.
um and that was a big risk too, and I can't emphasize this enough for entrepreneurs and anyone in business. You are going to have to be uncomfortable with taking that risk. You are going to have to say, I don't know where the next dollar of revenue is going to come to replace that business, but I know it makes business sense right now to walk away from this. And so that's what we did. We had no business at the time coming in that was going to replace that, but I hit the ground running, and I was at every trade show, selling, selling, selling. And then, by the end of that year, we did more revenue than we did the year before with that one customer.
Yes.
And so, you have to have you do have to have that tolerance for risk, absolutely, but you also got to have some grit, girl. You got to be able
Yep.
to say, "All right, I'm letting this one go. I can't just sit back and hope for the next thing to come in. I'm going to have to work it until I am so exhausted in order to replace that revenue," which ultimately we did, but we did it with better revenue, with better clients,
Hmm.
with people that respected us and our payment terms and the service that we provide, because it's unlike any other freight forwarding service. And so for us, we spend so much time on that service element. We needed customers that weren't just cost focused, they were service focused as well.
Yes. The thing that you brought up here, it's like, how do you find alignment? And I think so to your point, it's like we're so hungry as entrepreneurs for that sale and to be able to serve. But this, I think, is a metaphor for life too. Not everybody is meant to come along with you, and maybe they were for a
Yeah.
season. But if they don't value what you bring to the table, being able to walk away and understanding that when you walk
Yeah.
away, what I love that you said, we were able to attract better revenue
Yep.
because we opened up space. But I understand that it's scary and uncertainty. We're like, I don't know where that money is going to
Yeah.
come from. But I think the universe truly, I loved what you said about being grounded in faith. I'm very much the same, very spiritual. Is that I'm like, oh, I'm always
Yeah.
taken care of, and I'm going to go with my gut because it's going to allow me to attract what I want in.
Absolutely.
And I want to give you your flowers because you've been able to scale this company. You got it to 12 million in sales. Amazing. I would love for you to walk through because one of the biggest things you've done really well is it sounds like processes, internal processes. So, what did you all do for your processes? Because a lot of founders struggle with scale because their processes
Sure.
are a mess because they're being scrappy, and we get it. There's a point
Yeah.
where you just got to make it happen. But at what point were you able to start developing those processes? And yeah, what did that look like?
I would say this is where the beauty and the talent of my team enter, right? Because when I started this company, I of course had a process of import and export. I knew it like the back of my hand. But as businesses change, trends change, compliance changes, over the course of the years from like 2017 to like 2020, end of 2020, I realized, oh, okay, the process I built the company on isn't really doing it enough anymore. And rather than me saying, hey, I know the best answers to this, I always believe in hiring people smarter than me, stronger than me in certain areas, and, really those that can take what I'm envisioning and integrate it into the company. And so, I really, really cannot say enough incredible remarks about my team because they saw the need for micro level process within our overall process. Because the
Mm,
reality is, you'll see in almost every company that has internal processes, there's always going to be a gray area. There's always going to be, well, do I go here or do I go here? And when you think about our business, we've got a compliance process, but then we also have a tech process, right? A literal step by step of how to enter a shipment into our technology and manage it until its fruition. And so for me, I think, I saw the need that we needed to have not just one process. We had to have several processes, and those need to be constantly reviewed. And that's where ISO really did us well is we have an annual audit of every one of our processes, and we make sure like, oh, okay, this isn't working anymore. We need to fix this. And now I can't say enough about really cool AI tools that are out there that help you with your process. To call one
yes.
out, we just started using one called Scribe that it literally does the work for you with you click your mouse, right? And it takes screen grabs of your entire process. So if you're trying to train someone on technology and you're like, I'm losing my mind trying to take screenshots of each step, download an AI tool that can help guide you and make it more efficient. So those things have really helped us with
Yes.
scale. And then I think too, we've also learned it's not just like you have to open it up to creativity of your team. Because I think what happens now is a lot of upper management creates the process integrates the process and then holds people accountable to that process. But they're rarely asking for feedback on that process. Does it work? What needs to change on it? So right now, my entire management team, who are so deeply involved in operations with each one of their teams, they're building out our new processes with a new technology. And I made it that way because I said, listen, you guys are in it day to day. You see where there's a lot of gaps and too much time is being spent on things. And then the last thing I'll add to this is make it a company-wide goal. So we have one of our company-wide goals. We only do about four company-wide goals a year. And then this, of course, is added on to each person's specific goals. But company-wide goals, one of those that was super important to us is process improvement. And so our team's rewarded for the more process improvement goals that they bring to the table. And you
Yeah.
will find so much curiosity is born, creativity is born through that. I have people who have been with us for now 3 weeks that have said, "Hey, I've actually found a better way for us to, procure a trucking relationship if we use this tool instead of this tool." And none of us even knew about this tool. And so
Yeah.
I think it levels the playing field for all staff to come to the table with process improvement and also give them the notoriety that they're seeking maybe for bringing that to the table.
I love that you mentioned this because this is something we do with, startups that are like they're at 1 million and they're thinking of what's my path to 10. And it's usually they have to get their team on board. But what we find is the founders of the bottleneck because they're not developing these processes exactly like you're saying. So I
Yeah.
love, love, love this. Okay, so I love that you walked us through processes because I think that's obviously a fundamental to
Yes.
scale is that you got to build the right pillars in the business so it can be supported. And I would love for you to walk through tariffs. This is huge right now. It is every day it seems like
Yeah.
it's in the news, but it is so
Yeah.
important for business because I don't think a lot of people realize
Yeah.
how much logistically the world is hyper connected as it should be. And so when
Mm-hmm.
you think of this from your lens and what you're seeing right now, what are some things that should be top of mind for businesses? And what is some advice that you would have for navigating the uncertainty in this moment of how to prepare for whatever actually happens with tariffs that are going to affect quite a few businesses?
I have a love-hate relationship with tariffs. So the reason I love them, I'll start with that, is that, when you look at it as an American, it is a very strong leg for us to stand on in overall global trade environments, right? And there's a reason why governments have these and why they were born. From the very beginning of the founding of our nation, we had tariffs, right? And so I think those will always be they'll never go away, right? They're a truth to globalism. However, I hate them because I see the impact they have on businesses and consumers. And it's really hard to stomach it sometimes, especially with the small businesses. So I look at let's focus on China, for instance, right now, because that's all in the news about the tariffs. So what we're finding is there's a lot of short-term, huge impact, of course, because if you take, like, we ship a lot of hotel furniture. We have customers that manufacture this hotel furniture and they have manufacturing sites in China. Well, what happens is maybe they sold a purchase order a year ago at a certain rate, and that was at a certain duty tariff rate, right? Well, now when you add 10% on top of that, and then another 10% on top of that, there goes their entire margin possibly on that sale. And so, in the short term, thousands of companies are trying to navigate through how do we protect our margins on now what's probably going to eat away, right? And so when you think about agriculture, it's already such a low margin business that when you tack on tariffs on top of let's say containers of rice or corn that maybe you're importing from another country as a raw material for your pet food, forget about it, right? Like you've now been as a business squeezed to make the decision, do we raise the price to our end consumer or and effectively, hurt that relationship? Or do we stomach that and we lose profit in the short term? So short term, there's a huge impact. Long term, I think what's interesting is in the first Trump presidency or administration, that was really the first time in my career that I saw a huge tariff implementation. And so I do think it was the first time that companies started to realize, wow, okay, we're going to have to diversify our supply chain. And so what I saw even with our customers over the past, really 7 years is they started shifting and diversifying. Okay, we're going to manufacture in Vietnam now. Maybe India will have a site. Maybe South America will have a site. That leads into kind of my advice for companies now. That is still a good plan. The more diversification you have, the better off you're protected on these geopolitical issues. When you look at, it's just like the story I told you, when all your business is with one customer and that egg is in your basket and that egg breaks, you have nothing else in your basket. The same is true for supply chain. And so I think when there's a lot of geopolitical trade issues going on and that environment is very, very sensitive, it makes sense to start that process looking for new vendors. I will shout out, there's a few really, really important trade resources not a lot of people know about. If you go to trade.gov, the US Commercial Service, there are free tools on these websites that you can utilize. Almost every district in the United States has a representative of the US Commercial Trade Office that is there to help assist and navigate you to meet new manufacturers. I would highly advise a lot of companies to start looking at look at a lot of states, their governors will go on trade missions, and a lot of state level government or at the state level, governments will provide a lot of funding, sometimes cover with grants your entire cost to go with that trade mission. And then on top of it, I just went on one last year to Italy with the governor of Missouri. And I wanted to go there to sell my freight forwarding services to Italian companies that were importing to the US. And what was beautiful is that with that service, you are able to be paired with global experts that will build those meetings for you. They will say, okay, tell us your target market and what you're looking for, and we'll go communicate with those Italian trade agencies, Vietnam trade agencies to get you those meetings with those factories that you're interested in.
Yeah.
So I highly, highly recommend use what is free and what is there for you first before you pay all this money for a consultant to try to find you a manufacturer. You can also reach out to freight forwarders because we do so much business overseas. I could tell you, hey, we've got trade tools that I can run a quick search that takes me 5 seconds. If you've got a commodity code or you've got a description of what your commodity is, I can do I can reverse engineer to find you, hey, here's some factories that are really popular, and even find you that ability to reach out to them. And I can tell you from our business, we speak Vietnamese, Mandarin, Portuguese. And so we love being able to, and we have in the past, we've set up our clients with, hey, here's a factory's information. We'll broker that meeting for you and then let you take it from there. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of free tools. You just have to, put on your big girl, big boy pants and go out and ask for it. But diversifying your supply chain is going to be the number one piece of advice. The second is know what you're doing before you do it. If you are buying from Alibaba because you're brand new and it's the cheapest raw material you can get, make sure you know what you're doing first. Seek out advice, seek out a customs broker. I've seen so many deals done wrong in the beginning because, the factory says, we'll do the shipping for you. But that doesn't include the customs clearance and the delivery.
Ooh,
And
and that's expensive.
when things get caught in customs because you don't have the right importer of record license, you don't know what you're doing, you can pay thousands of dollars in storage and fines. And so just know what you're doing before you do it. Look at trade compliances, of course. And then, unfortunately, if it were that easy for us to get rid of tariffs, they'd be gone yesterday, right? It's not easy to get rid of them. So figure out how to mitigate them. Make sure the terminology in your purchase orders moving forward have a clause in there about if tariffs change, if they go up. Um, you're protected. You can pass, those are pass through costs then. Because what's tough and what I've seen is a lot of people do not have that terminology in their purchase orders, specific to at the trade level, right? At tariffs and duties. I think that is key. That is the one thing I would happily say pay for is if you've got a trade attorney, go ask them, hey, are we protected if tariffs go up by another 10%? Are we protected in our purchase orders to our customers now and with our
Yeah.
manufacturing overseas, right? There's dual purchase orders going on. So those
Yeah.
would be my big takes on tariffs.
Caitlin, that was like a master class for tariffs. I love all of this. And it kind of goes back to, I love the resources you shared. I think one of the things, unfortunately, I think city, state, and federal level, they have so many rich resources. Like our partner is New York City. And I talk to their team all the time. I'm like, we have to streamline this because you all have so many rich resources that people just don't know about how to take
Yeah.
advantage. And founders are overwhelmed. The other thing I heard you say also is that all of this goes back to relationships. It all like if you don't know what you don't know,
Yeah.
reach out to people, ask them. So thank you so much for that. And my final question to you, and a reason we do this podcast is because we want to revolutionize what success in business looks like for people. And is that it is not just one way. It is
Yeah.
the way that feels good to you, that is unique to your vision of success. And having these conversations allows people, I hope, to be able to say, "Ooh, I like that part of her story. I want to take that step. I want to do this." So when you think about you scaling this business, and when you're like, if we get this company at this place,
Yeah.
I feel like that is success to me. That is impact to me. What does that look like for you?
It's very different now than it did when I started. When I started, I had a lot of like this like feminine ego of like, I'm going to build a bigger company than the male-owned businesses I've worked for in the past, right? And then along the way, I realized that that was such a shallow, hollow idea of success, right? And so then I started to kind of reimagine what success looks like for me. And so now, and really this kind of started in 2020 when everyone's business was at the brink of failing, right? Because you didn't know what in March of 2020, you didn't know what was going to happen in the world and you had to answer some really big questions internally. And then I kind of decided, man, my purpose all along, success to me was this idea, this vision of Gateway for Good and creating gateways for advancement in other people. How do I get back to that? And how do I have a bigger impact in that? And what happened is it totally changed my desire for profit. Like I chose then purpose over profit, right? We still need the profit to have a purpose within our purpose, but I understood the whole idea of success differently because we all leave this earth with nothing, right? And I could go on and build $100 million company. But will I be happy at 100 million? What has to change for me to be happy? That as different seasons of this company grow. And right now we are in a heavy growth season. We have built out a sales team and we have got all of our certifications and we are like hitting this pedal. But I'm doing it in such a different way than what I would have done it 5 years ago. And I think there's a reason for that because if I would have been in a growth state in 5 years ago, it would have all been about profit and it would have all been about revenue. And now I'm doing it and saying, what impact can we have in this world as a company? How many individuals' lives can we impact as employees of this company? What does this look like? And so now what's really cool, Alex, is we built out a 1 year goal, a 3 year or I say goals, but they're visions. So a 1 year vision, a 3 year vision, and a 10 year vision. And with every single one of those, there's a gateway for good number of donations that's attached to every single one of them, right?
Yes.
And so that was not the case 5 years ago. And so I'm really glad I held back. I've never taken outside equity, or never given equity to outside private equity or capital. We've really grown bootstrapped all this way because I needed to learn these lessons as an entrepreneur, right? Or else the business world
Yes.
was going to eat me up. And so now I feel like I'm so much more mature as a business owner and I'm ready for that growth. And I'm going to do it very, very intentionally with purpose being that true compass for our ship.
Amazing. So, based on that unique vision of success for you and knowing where you are today, for the folks listening in,
Yeah.
what is one way they can be supporting you in achieving that vision?
I love that question. We are really into this personal relationship business, right? And so we don't spend a lot of money and capital on SEO marketing, on Google ads, because who's choosing a freight forwarder on Google, right? You choose them because, Nancy at company ABC loved Caitlin and loved her team, and it was the best experience. And so word of mouth referrals is the greatest gift someone can give to our company. If they're listening in on this podcast and they're like, "Wow, this company is really cool." It's rare that people bring up logistics and business conversations, but I promise you, if they do, we want to be the one that's like, "Hey, I know this awesome women-owned business, Global Gateway, that you should check out for that logistics issue." So, really, word of mouth referral and just passing along our story is the greatest gift. Your listeners and audience can give to us.